Hello, my name is Phil. I'm the rector of the Draycott and Lone Valley Benefice, and this is a Sunday sermon for the 10th of May, and it's part of our 21st Century Problems, First Century Solutions sermon series. And this week I want to think a little bit about abandonment. That word maybe means different things to different people, and our experiences of abandonment can be different because abandonment can take so many different shapes. For some people, it's deeply personal and relational. Maybe your experience of abandonment is a family that didn't hold together, a relationship that ended, a friend who disappeared when life got difficult, or a bereavement that changed everything. Some people may be able to relate to that, others might not, but maybe they can relate to it in a professional sense. The manager who sent you out to face the music on behalf of the whole team, and when you turned around, they were nowhere to be seen. Or that great idea that someone in head office had and decided that you needed to implement, but when it didn't work and there was mess to clear up, you were the one left with the mess to clear. Or maybe it's the colleague that kept you sane in your job you were struggling with, but then they got a better job at a different company. Or maybe for you, it's not a personal thing, it's a structural thing. Maybe you hit hard times and discovered that the public services and the benefit system that you thought would be there isn't working right now. Or politically, maybe you look at the current political setup of the parties in this country and actually wonder, who is there speaking up for me in all of this? Abandonment can take different forms and it hits us in different ways. But whether it's personal, professional, structural, or something else entirely, I think it's something that we all encounter at some point in our lives. And the question I want to explore is this: where do I turn when I feel abandoned, alone, and I don't know where to go? We're going to read our gospel reading, which comes from John chapter 14, and then we're going to see what that might say into this idea of feeling abandoned. If you love me, keep my commandments, and I will ask the Father, and he will give you another advocate to help you and be with you forever, the Spirit of truth. The world cannot accept him, because it neither sees him nor knows him, but you know him, for he lives with you and will be in you. I will not leave you as orphans, I will come to you. Before long the world will not see me anymore, but you will see me. Because I live, you also will live. On that day you will realize that I am in my Father, and you are in me, and I am in you. Whoever has my commands and keeps them is the one who loves me. The one who loves me will be loved by my Father, and I too will love them and show myself to them. I think that reading really speaks into this idea of abandonment, because in it the disciples find themselves in a situation where they might be feeling like abandonment is coming. Our gospel reading is part of what we sometimes call the farewell discourse. In John's gospel, chapters 14 to 17 capture a sermon that Jesus gave to his disciples at the end of the Last Supper. And in it, Jesus is preparing them for what is to come. The first line of Jesus' talk starts, "Do not let your hearts be troubled." Jesus knows that his disciples are going to very soon feel like they're in a very dark, lonely, and scary place. The disciples are going to be pulled all over the place and put under all kinds of pressures. They're probably going to be confused and overwhelmed by things. And they're going to be facing things without Jesus. They're going to be parted from him. And whilst they're apart from Jesus, they're going to see him crucified. So the farewell discourse is about preparing them for what is to come. He's giving them their final pep talk before he leaves them. They'll see him arrested, but then they'll see him ascend into heaven. Jesus has a lot of helpful things to say to them, but in our passage he's particularly focusing on telling them about the help that is coming, the Holy Spirit. When I first started learning how to preach, I always set out not to be the preacher who says things like, in the original Greek, but in the original Greek, the word that's translated as advocate in the start of the reading as we read it is not a word that really translates easily. It does sort of mean advocate, but that only gives part of its meaning. Other translators render the word as comforter, which also kind of gets a bit of it, but the word means more than just that. And then still other translations go with helper, which again still sort of means what it means, but it doesn't capture the entire essence of the word. The Holy Spirit is impossible to pin down and actually articulate what he, and it is a he, what he is. But looking at the various ways that that word Jesus used to describe him is translated gives us a strong sense of some of the things that the Holy Spirit did in the disciples' lives and will do in our lives. So, comforter, that's the word that older translations like the King James Bible use. And this word tells us about the Holy Spirit. And what it tells us is the fact that he's there to offer comfort and support when things are hard. Sometimes when something terrible has happened, there are no right words to be said. There's nothing that can be done to fix the problem. What we need is someone to simply be there with us in all of the mess. Esther and I have been married for 18 years now, and I'm still learning that sometimes when she tells me what's wrong, it's because she wants a hug rather than she wants advice on how to fix it. As I say, I'm still learning that, but the Holy Spirit has already got that down. The Holy Spirit is just there, and simply knowing that Jesus is with us through his Spirit sometimes is all we need to be able to cope with what life is throwing at us. But the Holy Spirit is more than a simple quiet presence in our lives. The more literal translations like the NRSV choose to translate that word as advocate. An advocate is someone who stands up for someone else to put their point across for them. When Jesus tells his disciples about the Holy Spirit in Luke's Gospel, he says that they will bring you before synagogues and rulers and the authorities. When they do, don't worry about how you're going to defend yourselves or what you're going to say, for the Holy Spirit will teach you at that very hour what you ought to say. So the Holy Spirit is an advocate in a very literal sense, by speaking the word the disciples are to speak when they find themselves in court. And he continues to do that for us today. We might not find ourselves in court defending our beliefs. We might not be aware of a voice coming out of nowhere in the middle of an argument saying, explain it like this. But I'm sure I can't be alone in finding that in the middle of difficult conversations, ideas come out of nowhere, and I find myself saying the right things when the right things hadn't even occurred to me before the conversation started. So the Holy Spirit is very much our advocate, but there's so much more to him than that. He's not simply a kind of divine teleprompter. Some translations that are focusing primarily on readability, like the Good News translation, render our word helper. This word is maybe the vaguest of the three we're looking at today, but it does give us that sense of how varied the Spirit's role is. The Spirit isn't confined to simply telling us what to say or being a strong, silent presence in times of trouble. The Holy Spirit is there to equip us by giving us what we need when we need it. In our reading last week, if you were with us last week, we saw how the Holy Spirit emboldened Stephen to hold fast to Jesus in the face of his imminent death. And throughout the whole of the book of Acts, we see examples of Jesus' followers finding strength that they need. And it still happens today. Maybe it's not quite as dramatic as we read in Acts last week, but I can't be the only person who goes into an interview or a meeting feeling really anxious, but comes out afterwards realizing the Holy Spirit helped me to stay calm and to get my point across properly when I was panicking inside beforehand. And even if you can't think of an example of that happening in your life off the top of your head, I do believe the Holy Spirit gives each and every member of God's church special gifts and talents, which I believe always are specific gifts and talents that that specific church needs at that specific time. So we still don't really have the language to pin down exactly what the Holy Spirit is, but these three words, comforter, advocate, and helper, do give us a bit of an idea. But actually, Jesus doesn't just leave his disciples with a definition of the Holy Spirit. He leaves them with a promise that he is not abandoning them. Yes, he's going. Yes, things are about to get frightening and confusing. Yes, they're going to face grief and fear and uncertainty. But abandonment is not what is happening, because Jesus says, I will not leave you as orphans. In other words, you are not being left alone. You are not being forgotten about. You are not being cut adrift. The Holy Spirit is not some vague religious idea. He is the living proof that even when Jesus is no longer physically beside them, the presence of God has not gone elsewhere. And that promise is not empty sentiment. It takes shape in the gift of the Holy Spirit. Because when the relationship breaks down, when someone you trusted walks away, when grief hits, when you're sitting in the ache of being let down, the Holy Spirit comes as comforter. Not always waving a magic wand and making the pain instantly disappear, but by being with you in the middle of it, sitting with you as you mourn, holding you together when it feels like everything is falling apart, reminding you that even here you're not alone. And when you're overwhelmed, when the pressure is on, when responsibility has been dumped on your shoulders by someone who seems to be nowhere to be seen, when you're carrying more than you feel able to bear, the Holy Spirit comes as helper, giving strength you did not think you had, giving courage to keep going, giving wisdom for the next step, not always removing the burden, but helping you to carry it. When you feel voiceless, when you feel ignored, when you're struggling to explain yourself, when you're facing situations bigger than you, the Holy Spirit comes as an advocate, speaking with you and through you, giving words when yours fail, giving courage when fear takes over, standing with you when you feel like no one else is standing up for you. So no, Jesus does not promise that abandonment will never touch our lives. This world can still wound us. People will still fail us. Systems will disappoint us. But Jesus does promise this. You will not face it alone. He said to his disciples, and he says to us, I will not leave you as orphans.